Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Okay, welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism. Jumping right into it today, we're going to talk about alliances and allegiances and how important those are and whatnot. And you know, it's funny, right? Because Mick and I were talking about this earlier. I'm Canadian, and I would say that I sit left of center on the political spectrum if I had to be classified, because I actually try not to do that to myself. And Mick, I think you would characterize yourself as, I don't remember how you said that. You characterize yourself as
right of center. Are you talking about politically? Is it?
Yeah, if you were on a spectrum.
Yeah. I don't know. Probably am on the spectrum, but not the one you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm right of center. I'm nonpartisan, but if I was to identify myself, it would be primarily as a Reagan type Republican. It always has been.
Oh, right. Yes, we were talking about that.
Pretty left of center. And so if you remember, what was that damn TV show that Michael J. Fox is on? They used to call me Alex P. Keaton because in the show he was conservative and his parents were.
That's right. And he goes to like young Republican conferences, right?
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, not that anybody cares, but I identify myself if I would as a Reagan type Republican, which seems to be a vanishing species in my country.
I thought you were going to say you identify yourself with Michael J. Fox, which he's Canadian, so
he's great.
I'd be happy with that. I mean, yeah,
he's great. I mean, how could you not like Michael J. Fox?
I know. But
Alex P. Keaton was his name on the show. So that's
No, I know that show. It's not Family Ties. No.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I used to watch that show too, but we just dated ourselves. But I think you know, it's an interesting one as we speak. You know, you and I don't just talk on the podcast; we're texting each other in the background all the time and passing news back and forth. And it's been an interesting trip through the world of international politics these last few weeks and months, because ultimately, you know. And I think it's interesting when you and I talk too, because we come from different parts of the political spectrum, not that far apart, frankly, I don't think. But, you know, we do have different, like I'm a pacifist, but I wouldn't say that I'm also not like a do nothing person. Right. I've never heard you say anything, but I would assume you're not a pacifist. Right. So it's one of those things.
To be a Marine pacifist. That's true.
Yeah. But at the same time, I think, you know, it's interesting when we talk about this, right? Because alliances and allegiances today have come under fire across so many parts of the world. But, you know, for us being two countries that are so closely connected physically and I would say even emotionally or, you know, economically, it's been an interesting discussion over the last culturally as well, right? There are things that I know are very different in the Canadian culture compared to the American culture, and there are also things that we're very closely related to. You take most of our hockey players.
That only a Canadian or American to an outsider. Yeah, I think the cultures are very similar.
Yes, I would say. I would agree with that. So, but you know. It's interesting though as well because, you know, we come from different political spectrums as well. My belief system is based around a parliamentarian constitutional monarchy in a multi-party system. We were talking about this morning, where I believe at minimum there should be three parties, because I also was that nerd who grew up on the triumvirate, the stories of the first triumvirate of Pompey, Crassus, and you know, etc., and balancing out those powers. And so I believe in that, right? And we talked about this a little bit this morning. You know, the American system right now, it's two party, but there is a triumvirate built into your constitution and the setup of your government, right, with the executive, judicial, and legislative branches. And we actually have the same thing. Which is different in its own way, because our executive is the governor general, who represents the king, And then we have our legislature, which is parliament, and then we have our judiciary, which is our Supreme Court as well. And we have a constitution. So there's so many parallels, but also differences, right? Which I think are important to take into account when we have these conversations.
Yes, all offspring of the democracy founded in Athens about the same time, or close to the same time, relatively, as Stoicism. I think we're both an example of the legacy in that. I think that's part of what we're talking about today when it comes to allies in alliances. We'll start where we'll probably end up, but this is obviously came up because of the challenge to what I would call the most significant alliance in history, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, short NATO, which has, I think, promoted the endurance of democracies since the end of the World War II, since the Second World War. And it's been challenged, unfortunately, with this idea that the U.S. needs to acquire Greenland by either forcing a sale, almost like a hostile takeover, or actually using military force, which is obviously completely against the treaty and, in my opinion, completely unwarranted, unethical, and immoral, as far as there is morality between nations and the oath that you give. So I've been talking about it a lot. I'm not going to bleed this into what I usually talk about, national security and stuff, but it certainly is.
You have another podcast for that.
Yeah, we'll be talking about right after this. But in addition to that, and you can obviously see where I stand on that, there was comments made specifically about our allies and their contributions in the global war against terror. And so I spoke a lot about that, including on the BBC, which love me some BBC. And I have to say that of all the things that came out of it, that was the most difficult to accept as an American. And I say that because, on September 11th, the United States was attacked, right, by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda, significantly, way beyond anything we expected, certainly from a terrorist organization. It was more like a nation-state type attack. And that was the only time in history that the fifth article of the NATO treaty was instigated. And countries like yours, Canada for sure, but a lot of NATO allies, to include Denmark, which includes Greenland, and of course, the UK itself, not only came to America's defense willingly and without complaint, but stayed there for 20 years. And actually went into Iraq, which, although we tried to tie it to it, I don't think anybody today ties the war in Iraq to the attack on 9/11. But our NATO allies went willingly and freely, and like I said, without complaint. And I can say, as somebody who served years in both places, endured the same hardship, witnessed and put themselves in harm's way the same as we did, and paid the ultimate price. If anything good comes out of this, I hope Americans look that up, realize how many of our allies gave the ultimate sacrifice defending the U.S. And I know we joke about this a lot. You told me not to. I'm going to do it anyway. I apologize. As a person, Canadians always apologize, right? Americans,
I apologized twice already today.
That's just not the way allies should be treated. So I'll start there, and I know we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, but
for sure, it's interesting, right? And just to speak on it, and we talked about this offline. I think it's as much as I try to stay away from some of these political discussions because it's not really my place in some ways, right? But I mean, I was deeply, deeply hurt by some of the comments made that forget that the alliances that we have forged coming out of the Second World War, right? Like when, coming out of the First World War, Canada's got one of the largest militaries in the world, right? And we're helping form the League of Nations, right? And then the Second World War happens. We are the third largest military of the Allies, and there was an interesting point about this because there was a comment made. I won't really quote it specifically, but there was a comment made about like what Europe would be like if if the war hadn't gone certain ways. And you kind of say, well, Canada was fighting the war in 1939. Canadians landed on Fortress Europe at Dieppe in 1942, right? I've read those stories of those Canadians.
Yeah.
And to make comments like that, I find extremely disrespectful to those who have fought. I have friends who are service members. I have friends whose partners are still in the service, and it is extremely disappointing to me when that kind of rhetoric happens, because I think it takes away from the fact that these are not singular instances of combat. These are global fights that have occurred with friends and allies. And Canada did not go to Iraq. I should say that. We didn't do that. That was a choice we made not to
Well,
do.
NATO did. NATO
did. NATO did.
Members of NATO did. Yes.
Right, but Canada was focused primarily in Afghanistan. In fact, we were there pretty early, is my understanding. I don't really know. I was not in the military. We were there pretty early, though.
Yes, and you were there for a long time, and
we were
lost soldiers, and you were on the front lines, as was the UK, as was the Danes.
And our connection to Afghanistan is interesting because my tailor is an Afghan who moved to Canada in the last 20 years. And when I worked at Bell Canada as a call operator, as a service center call operator, the young woman who sat next to me was from Afghanistan. And so we have those connections. And I think I struggle with that, because I think as well, and it's something we're really going to get to on the topic today, is that these alliances and allegiances with what we make, right? It is important that we honor them, but it is important that we do not break those things so easily. They mean something. They're words on a page or a signature on a book or whatever it is. But I think there's an importance to these that we have to hold in higher regard than just disregarding them and throwing them away because of, jingoism or saber rattling in somebody's own country. And I think that's going to hopefully set us up to what we're going into. So let's maybe go back to the beginning of this, but ultimately that's where I stand on that one. Even as a pacifist, I do believe that it's important to remember that the military operations that all allies did throughout the global war on terror not be forgotten or disregarded. I mean, look, out of the Second World War, Canada helped write the UN Charter for Human Rights and Freedoms. One of the 5 original authors is a Canadian. So it's not like we were... It's not like we did some fighting and left. So it's an interesting position. Anyways, go ahead, Mick.
Yeah. So, and then you go back and you're like, okay, how does this necessarily attach to Stoicism? Yeah. I'd say 2 parts. As an individual, and if you look at Stoicism, particularly Zeno's Republic, as one of the, I would say, foundational documents to democracy. Alliances have essentially kept democracies going, helped bring it into existence, kept it going, fighting against autocracies since the very beginning. So if you look at, the Persian Wars and starting with the ancient Greeks, obviously Athens and Sparta, and most people are familiar with Thermopylae, with the Spartans holding off the hordes of Persians and the immortals. Then of course people go, they lost, didn't they? Yeah, well, they lost, but they also they fought to a point where they allowed the Athenians to get their fleets out of Piraeus, which is the port city of Athens. And then the Athenians, playing their part of the alliance, beat the Persians at Salamis as a naval battle. It's probably the most historic naval battle in history. And by the way, and I've stumbled upon this when I lived there, you can go up the mountains over Salamis, which is an island, and there's actually a plaque that's in ancient Greek. And I had a Greek friend with me that said, this is where Darius sat and watched his fleet get destroyed at the Battle of Salamis. Right. It's really cool because it's not like a thing. It's not like a tourist thing, because it's just sitting out there by itself.
Yeah.
And then you turn around and you're looking at the island.
Yeah.
It's cool. Right. And then Plataea, the Spartans, of course, mobilized. They were, by the way, they were slow to mobilize. Everybody thinks that they were warmongers. I think because they knew more about war than most, they
Yeah.
weren't necessarily. But when they did, they annihilated the Persian threat at
Right.
Plataea, and that, I think, allowed democracy to continue. If not,
Hmm.
most of Europe would be, of course, speaking Persian, and
Yeah.
likely would have fell under the dynasty that was a Persian emperor,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. But as a classicist
So,
myself, right, you have to remember, just because I don't want to lose something there. People think it's just the 300 Spartans there, but they had Arcadians, Atticans, Thespians, Thebans, Corinthians. I think it would, like, I don't remember the breakup, but my understanding is there were actually more non-Spartans there, and that
yes,
alliance
that's
is a
true.
very right. And the Spartans
That's a good point.
never forgot about that, right? And again, we're looking at this situation
It's
where it's like
Xerxes. I knew I was wrong. Sorry,
no,
sorry to interrupt you,
Xerxes.
but I
Yeah,
knew it's like
no, good point.
Darius fought Alexander the Great.
Yeah,
Xerxes.
his
I was,
fight.
you know, to
Yes,
the extent anybody does listen to us, I'm sure somebody will be like, seriously, dude, she
somebody's
got that
waiting.
wrong.
They're waiting to press send on
Yes,
that comment.
and I would have been super embarrassed. It's Xerxes the
Okay.
first, the king of kings,
Yes, the
who was the
king of
son of
kings.
Darius.
Right.
Darius is the one who Alexander
Right.
defeated. But anyway,
Yeah.
sorry,
But
go ahead. I couldn't. I
no,
couldn't.
no, it's great. Thank you for pointing that out, because
Mhm.
even I didn't pick up on that, because Darius is Persian. But that whole thing, it's like there's 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 Spartans and there's so many others there. You kind of go like, okay, so is it all Sparta? No. Did they lead it? Yes. Did Leonidas stand there on his own as a man standing in front of his own troops and leading them? Yes. But it's important to remember that even throughout history, many countries have not stood alone, and that they don't. And it was, Sparta never forgot that those allies stood with them. But go ahead, go ahead.
Yes. So, in the way I tie it, obviously, I'm tying it to the democracy. If you look at
Yeah.
how that happened, again, we'd be speaking uh, Persian. If you look at how Rome developed and became basically the Western civilization uh, protege of ancient Greece,
Hmm.
and then the development of European democracies through medieval times, etc., all the way
Yeah.
up into include uh, the rise of fascism.
Yes.
Right? It was an alliance that defeated fascism,
Yeah.
and you already talked about it. Right? The Canadians, the Brits, and finally the Americans,
Yeah.
who was probably the straw that broke the fascist camel's back.
Hmm.
Right? When we decided, and by the way, I got a bunch of quotes as I usually do because I don't want to mumble them. But for some
It's good.
reason, it did not include the person who said it when I texted it to myself. So
Yeah.
we'll play a little game here. I think I know him, but okay. And this is one I wanted to highlight. There is only one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that is fighting without them. What do you think, Sunday?
Classic or modern?
Modern, old.
Modern, older. Uh, Washington.
Winston Churchill.
Winston Churchill. There you go. My
Yeah,
boy.
right.
My
So,
boy.
yeah, yep. Who was definitely a stoic. But
Yeah.
and then it, defeated fascism, or we'd all be speaking German and probably would have fell under the autocratic rule of
Okay.
Hitler and whoever came after him. And
Oh,
then, of
geez.
course, we already talked about this: the Cold War.
Hmm.
The Cold War, NATO. That was an alliance of all alliances. I think the most significant military alliance in history.
Hmm.
And it also stopped democracies from being overcome by communism,
Yeah.
right? We'd all be speaking Russian. So I think there is a connection to Stoicism through democracy's progression and
Yeah.
survival that still exists today as a real threat.
Hmm.
So alliances are as important as ever for the prosperity of freedom and democracy.
Yeah.
And I do think there's an individual aspect of alliances, and that is that you have your bond is your word, your oath has value, and honor as important as anything else, and
Yeah.
more important than some transactional relationship.
Hmm.
So whether it's you talking to a friend and agreeing to do something, when you shake your hand, that should be all that needs to happen. When you give an oath to an ally that you'll be there for them, not being there for them is a tarnish on your honor. Almost is inexcusable. So I think the connection between alliances and stoicism is both as an individual and as the promotion of democracy, individual liberties, and freedom.
Yeah.
That's where I would draw the connection.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree with that. I mean, you know, it's shown throughout history, especially when you go far enough back, right? Like that there are great alliances throughout history that allow for freedoms to be upheld or tyranny to be overthrown. And, when you look at or even just for peace to be maintained, right? We've talked about this on earlier podcasts. Marcus was a big fan of the treaty. He would say, like he's saying to the Marcomanni up in northern Austria, he's saying, "We're good. Let's leave it at that. Let's sign a treaty. I'll pay you not to be coming into our lands again, and let's plant it there." Or some of the northern tribes in Gaul and whatnot, right? And that's a really important thing. Like Marcus never broke those treaties. He was never the aggressor in those ones, and I think there's something to be said for that. Interestingly, though, as well, like I also think that you can relate some of this to the Greek concept of xenia, right? Which is where everybody is, and it's the cosmopolitanism we see in Stoicism today. And in some ways, like I've looked at that at xenia and the cosmopolitanism that we talk about within Marcus and the justice virtue of Stoicism. In some ways, it's like anybody can be an ally. Anybody can be your next partner in some endeavor, right? And so not only is it important to honor the allegiances you have now, it's to act honorably and be prepared for the fact that in the future you may need a further alliance, and that honor has to, upholding that honor and upholding that ethos, I think makes for a much easier time. If you break your allegiances and treaties all the time now, then in 6 months, if you need help, people will enter that with caution, exactly. At least with caution, if not fear or straight up disregard for the offer of
Right.
The laurel
So
branch.
There's a very practical effect on you too.
Absolutely.
Right. If you can't be trusted, they won't trust you.
Yeah.
You won't have alliances. And good luck to going it alone.
Yes.
Bad idea. I got another quote for you. This would be more of a Cold War, so I'll give you a line. It's not as known as some of these, but freedom is not the sole prerogative of a lucky few, but the inalienable right of all mankind, and our alliances help defend that truth.
Cold War.
Yeah. Just think of the lions of the Cold War.
The lions of the Cold War?
Yeah, the ones the lions being like the leaders.
Yeah. Eisenhower?
Good guess. Close. Close. Keep going. Just go a little further on in history.
Well, not Kennedy.
Same. Oh, I got him. Keep going. Just think of me.
I'm stuck.
Reagan.
Reagan. Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Because when I think of for some reason, when I think of Cold War, I think it's because I'm a student of Canadian Cold War history in the 60s, because that was a big shift in Canadian military.
Yeah.
So I get stuck in the 50s and 60s all. I forget the Cold War went till 91. I always forget that.
So. And then this one, so I wouldn't even ask you, but let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to ensure the survival and success of liberty.
Mm-hmm.
Right. John F. Kennedy.
Kennedy.
I mean, if you look at all those quotes taken together, Churchill, Roosevelt, Kennedy, I'm not Roosevelt, Reagan, Kennedy, there's a lot of order there, sorry.
Yeah.
But it does talk about what we're talking about. Like our alliances exist not just to be some kind of war conglomerate.
Yeah.
it is actually to ensure the existence and the endurance of freedom.
Yes.
I think that is at the core of the political aspects, if you will, of Stoicism.
Yeah. And I would actually say, and this is something we didn't talk about this before the podcast. There's something that comes up in my mind always with alliances, which is I believe in many ways that alliances are one of the key things that makes us human. If you
Mhm.
go back 40, 50, 60,000 years, right? You're living in a cave or a hut or whatever it is. I think it's probably huts at that point. And the people on the other side of the valley, right? They
Mhm.
could just come and could just come and take you out, and that's a reality of everything. But the thing is that that tribal people always call that tribal, and I almost view that as primal, right? Like
Yep.
when you look at primates in the wild, right? Like there aren't really merges of two lion prides together. You aren't looking at two, groups of gorillas. They don't usually coalesce very well together. They don't amalgamate very well. And I think as human beings, right, when you go back, there was an interesting point made by an anthropologist about when was the turning point for us as human beings when we really created civilization. And this was something Sandy Toksvig talks about this on an episode of QI, and it was that when they have found first evidence of someone with a broken leg that was
Mhm. Yeah, I
mended,
know what you're talking about. Yep.
right, and that was mended, that's a point where humans switched from leaving behind anybody that would hold the herd up
Mhm.
to caring for another. And
Mhm.
in essence, because of the time period, especially when you've got like saber-toothed tigers and really way bigger stuff than we've got today, that I think sets us apart. And what makes us human beings is this ability to form alliance, an ability to have this Xenia mindset of caring for somebody from outside of your tribe, outside of your home. And I think that's really important to uphold. I've never really talked about it this way, but I do believe that that's a major turning point for us. And when I think about it, right, the United Nations for me was a huge turning point in the world's history of us as a species, where we decided that we were going to try and get together and work stuff out on the table as opposed to on the battlefield. And
Mhm.
those alliances and allegiances that are formed through that are so important to us as human beings and moving forward. The consciousness that we have as a people to say we don't want to start with pushing the big red button, right? Sets us apart because in the jungle, right? If a gorilla doesn't like you, like he's going to smack you right in the face, right? That's their
Mhm.
first step. And I do believe that our ability to not do that is what sets us apart as a species. That's my
There is a
long-winded rant,
yeah, there is a duality of man, right? So I'm not
yes,
one that thinks that men is, I mean, other than our intellect, is all that unique in the animal world, to be frank. Um, the duality, man, is what you just said, and that would be on the positive side.
yeah,
That that humans do care for each other,
hmm,
even to a point where it could cause them to be more vulnerable, especially in the old days. But we're also the most violent, right? Gorillas don't freaking spend any time trying to kill other gorillas. Actually, they try to
right,
dominate. Men try to dominate other gorillas, but then
yes,
as soon as they win, they leave them. They
yeah,
don't rip them to shreds. They don't kill. You know what I mean? Most
that's right,
animal
yes,
species aren't psychopathic serial killers. Most animal species don't spend 100% of their intellectual capacity at sometimes in our history at trying to
hmm,
figure out how to kill each other better.
yeah,
So I do think humans have some incredible aspects, intellectually, of course,
hmm,
and sometimes with humility and compassion,
yeah,
but not all. And I do think the idea that we hold ourselves up as some kind of entity that's above animal is just factually untrue. But
yeah,
I guess so. The ultimate question of man. We are both, um, in some ways, a depiction of what is good, and in
yeah,
some ways, in a depiction of what is patently evil, um,
yes,
even beyond what's in the regular animal. And there's plenty of, if you really study zoology and
hmm,
nature science, there's plenty of examples of animal compassion, not just toward their own species, but
yes,
other species, right?
Yeah,
So
I will give you that for sure.
yeah, yeah. But to your point, I guess we should look at what the dual nature of man is and try to essentially arc toward the good one, good side, right? And that is, and I know this is might be a stretch
Yeah.
for alliances, but essentially, if your alliance's purpose, it really comes down what your alliance's purpose is, right? So if your
Yes.
alliance's purpose is to dominate the world and take everybody's stuff, then you're not going toward the better nature of man. If your alliance is to promote democracy, freedom, and accountability toward all, then you're in a good alliance. And I think that's what Stoicism would promote. And I think
Yeah,
that's
and
what
I
our
think
alliances in NATO essentially has done.
yeah, I think
And
NATO has come. Yeah, for sure. I think NATO
there's
has come
problems
off.
with the UN, but yeah,
Yeah, but I think they're trying, right? Like, Socrates would have said, like, it's not so much like you never really succeed as long as you keep trying, though. That's the win, right?
yeah,
And try. People will lambast, for example, the League of Nations, the precursor to the UN, and how it didn't prevent World War II. And I'm always like, I got to give them points for trying. They tried. It did not work. And I agree that there were problems with it and things didn't really, work out how we wanted. But at the same time, it would be incredibly disrespectful to the memory of the people who thought that it could be something
sure,
that stopped wars, right? They still tried. But I agree with you about alliances. You basically have to look at alliance, in my view, you have to look at alliance and ask yourself, like, is this alliance based in virtue or not? Because
yes,
if it does not act in accordance with virtue, especially justice and temperance and wisdom, right? Courage is still useful. You have to have courage to uphold those things, but ultimately, if you are not upholding justice and temperance, I think for me in an alliance, because we're talking really about like military alliances, and I think that's an important distinction to make here, right? If you're not upholding virtue, I think that's where you have to say, look, this is not that alliance must be broken. I think in many ways a Stoic would see that pretty black and white, where if this is not virtuous, we either have to fix it or we have to end it because it's not. There's some point where you just have to say, I can't continue on with sort of not complacently, but acceptance of
mhm,
non-virtuous actions through this alliance, right?
yes, it does
And I'm
really
not
come
calling for
down,
anything. I'm not calling for anything to be dissolved. I'm not doing that. I'm
right?
just saying I think it gets pretty black and white at some point. You're either being virtuous or not. And when you look at the articles of NATO, I think there is virtue built into it, right? As an
Yes,
example.
I agree, and I agree that it is the purpose that really drives whether it's virtuous or not, and whether it's an alliance that would be in
Yeah.
conformity with the principles.
Yeah.
And on the UN, I do think there's a lot of issues with the UN, but ultimately we're better off for it, and we're better off trying to improve it. Because if those
Hmm.
type of international organizations didn't exist, then
Yeah.
essentially it would just be tribalism.
Yeah.
It would be the strongest, what Thucydides, which is often quoted now even more than ever. The strong do what they will, the weak do what they must.
Yeah.
It'll just be this. It'll just be the strongest uh, get everything they want essentially, and that's a big discussion. I think to
Hmm.
plug your prime minister, I think his speech at Davos is going to go down as one of the more important speeches of you know this decade at least, because it's talking about that. It's talking about a world order that's starting to change and shift,
Yeah.
um, and and I think a lot of what he called the middle powers, right?
Yeah.
The middle powers, either you're invited to dinner or you're on the menu. I think was almost his exact quote.
Yeah.
If these international organizations break down, it's not going to be to the benefit of the world society. If
Yeah.
there needs to be improvements, we should always be doing that, right? Nobody would
Yeah.
disagree
No,
with
for
that, I don't
sure.
think. Um, but
But
the
that
idea
eternal
that we need to
vigilance is
throw it
important
out,
always.
of
Yeah.
course, yeah, yeah, internal to a country and external, we
Yeah.
should always be trying to be better.
Absolutely. And as a Canadian, it's funny because it is my right through the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's my right as a human being that I can disagree with people on things, right? But I
Mhm.
I have been a proud Canadian, and also very fearful of why these kinds of conversations have to happen at the leader level. But I am proud of what I have seen there, and what he has done in these last few weeks, especially because what he's also not doing, because I think he sees a value in us talking versus turning this into some tearing apart of an alliance, is I think he's standing up and saying, look, this has gone far enough. We must have this discussion. We must be better. And we cannot allow ourselves to go into this, I would say, someone would probably call it tribalism mindset going forward. I am so incredibly proud of him as a Canadian. And yes, I am I am nonpartisan federally in politics here in Canada. But I'm happy to say I did vote for him. I voted for the Liberal Party, and I fully support his stance on this one because I think it aligns with me and my belief that you're right. I think we've lost our way a little bit, and we have to find a way back to the core values that we built these alliances on, that we built, the improvement of the globe on. Right.
Yes.
That's my first personal view.
Yes. The only connection I have to Carney is his family's from Mayo.
That's right.
I always have to slip that in. That's just one of the places my family's from in Ireland.
Yeah.
I'll claim it. Certainly, he's proven to be quite a leader, I'd have to say.
Yeah.
I'd say he's proven to be quite a leader.
But it's interesting too that we have a man as Prime Minister in Canada who wrote a book called Values, which is about ethical. I haven't read it. I have to say I haven't read it. I have a signed copy, and it's always on my to read list. But it's about ethical.
Read it.
Yeah, we should read it. But it's about ethical values in business and how to use those to create a better business for yourself and for others, essentially. But I think it's a little more universal as well. I shouldn't really talk too much about it because I don't know about it. But I saw him speak. That's what happened.
Let's read it. The one other aspect of what I see when I go to Stoic conferences, in addition to military people and athletes, and scientists, is business people. And I've asked, I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I think they should be, but I've asked them, why? What's with all the interest in, especially really successful businessmen and women? And what I'm told is, look, I've done really well. I've mastered whatever industry they're in, but I want more. And one thing that I want to bring into business is virtues and ethics.
Yeah.
And I only want to do business with people who have virtues and ethics. So the fastest way I can do to find the other people like that is go to a Stoic conference, because I'm not saying that we're all great or better than anybody else, but if you're even there, that shows you're interested in virtue and ethics. That's what they told me, right? So I'm like, makes sense, right? So if you want to do business with people that have the same values that you do,
right,
that's the quickest way. And they actually, the Young Professional Organization, YPO, they host the Stoic events all the time.
Yeah,
they bring in speakers. Sure. So it's another aspect of it. In a way, that's an alliance. To try to tie it into what we're talking about today. Like if you're looking for business partners or cooperative corporations to work together, that's an alliance in the economic sense.
It is.
Which is just as important, in some ways more important than any other aspect of whether it's military or anything else.
Totally. And that's the thing, right? We talk about, we were saying at the beginning, we talk about this, and we're talking about military and political alliances, but we also have to keep in mind that alliances come up in every days of our lives, right? We have alliances at work, we have alliances in families, and they're unspoken. You don't sign a pact with your uncle, but it's one of those things we have to keep in mind as we go forward. So I'll close by saying, as much as this is definitely something about current events and military and economic alliances around the world, we can take these lessons as we go into our day-to-day, I think. So, but we'll wrap up there. Would love to hear from everybody on this one. This is very much current events, and we'd love to hear what everybody thinks on that one. So info@pubandporch.com, or we're on Twitter, or leave a comment in the video on YouTube. Would love to hear from you all. It's going to be an interesting time as we go forward in this world. So thanks for today, Mick. Cheers.
Sláinte. Thank you for listening to the Pub and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pubandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pubandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pub and Porch out.